Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you, because this will sound impossible. 3 months ago, I was standing on a cliff in Northern California, seriously considering whether I wanted to keep living. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, marine biologist, 47 years old, and I'd spent 2 decades watching the ocean die. And on that night, something happened that changed everything I thought I knew about humanity, about Earth, and about why any of this matters. An alien survivor, fleeing the collapse of their own civilization, landed right there on that cliff and told me something that shattered my entire worldview. They said Earth isn't dying, it's being born. That we're not victims of some cosmic joke. We're the rescue team the entire galaxy has been desperately waiting for. And what they showed me about why your personal pain has cosmic purpose, why your individual choices ripple through dimensions you cannot see, will prove that giving up now would be the greatest tragedy in galactic history. If you've ever felt like nothing you do matters, like we're all doomed anyway, like one person can't possibly make a difference, what I learned that night will change everything. But I need you to stay with me, because what happens around the 40-minute mark, when this being reveals humanity's true role in universal evolution, will fundamentally transform how you see your own life, your own struggles, and your own power. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on notifications, because you need to hear this story all the way through. And if you're someone who truly seeks to understand your essence, to access something divine within you, to awaken to your real potential, check out the ebook in the first pinned comment below. Because what I'm about to share isn't just information, it's activation. But first, you need to understand who I was before that impossible night. Because without knowing how deep into darkness I'd fallen, you won't understand the magnitude of what was revealed to me. And you won't recognize yourself in my story. Even though, I promise you, this is your story too. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. I'm a marine biologist specializing in coral reef ecosystems. Or at least, I was. By the time that night came, I wasn't sure what I was anymore. Just a woman who'd spent 20 years documenting death. I grew up in San Diego, fell in love with the ocean when I was 7, spent every summer diving with my father. He was the one who taught me that coral reefs are the rainforests of the sea, nurseries for thousands of species, protein source for 1 billion people, natural barriers protecting coastlines from storms. He died when I was 19, and I dedicated my career to protecting what he loved. But here's what they don't tell you when you choose environmental science as your calling. You're going to watch everything you love die, and you're going to be completely powerless to stop it. In 2003, when I started my doctoral research, the reefs I studied in the Philippines were vibrant. Explosions of color. Fish in every direction. Coral formations that took centuries to build, intricate as cathedrals. By 2010, half of it was bleached white. By 2015, 70% was dead. By 2023, I was basically studying a graveyard, documenting the corpse of what used to be paradise. And it wasn't just my research sites. It was global. The Great Barrier Reef, half gone. Caribbean reefs, 80% declined. Coral Triangle, collapsing. Every model, every projection, every piece of data told me the same thing. We've crossed tipping points. Positive feedback loops are engaged. The ocean is acidifying faster than any time in the last 300 million years. We're too late. I met my husband, David, at a conference in 2012. He was a climate scientist, studied hurricane intensification. We bonded over shared grief. We were both watching our fields of study transform into fields of catastrophe. We got married in 2014, and for a few years, we held each other up. When I came home destroyed by another bleaching event, he understood. When he presented models showing Cat 5 hurricanes becoming the new normal, I got it. We were both carrying the weight of knowledge that most people didn't have or didn't want to believe. But that weight gets heavier every year. And sometimes, love isn't enough to keep you from drowning under it. In September of 2022, Hurricane Helena, a Category 6, which shouldn't exist according to the old scale, hit the Gulf Coast. David was there. He'd gone to gather data, to document wind speeds, to prove what we all knew was happening. He was in a supposedly safe structure, a concrete building rated for Cat 5 winds. But Helena was beyond Cat 5. The building collapsed. They found his body 3 days later. I stopped feeling anything after that. Not grief. Grief would have been something. I just went numb. Hollow. I kept working because I didn't know what else to do. I'd wake up, scan the climate news, always worse, force myself to go to the lab, analyze data that confirmed everything was collapsing faster than we'd predicted, come home to an empty apartment, pour a glass of wine that became a bottle, and pass out. Then wake up and do it again. My colleagues started to worry. Sarah, you need to talk to someone. You need to process David's death. You can't keep going like this. But I didn't want to process it. Processing it would mean feeling it. And feeling it would mean admitting that the man I loved died trying to document a catastrophe that we couldn't stop, that his death was meaningless, that all of our work was meaningless, that we were just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic while pretending we were doing something important. The breaking point came 3 months ago, in late October. I was presenting research at a conference in San Francisco, ocean acidification rates in the Pacific. My data showed we'd hit a pH level that starts dissolving pteropod shells. Pteropods are the base of the ocean food chain. If they go, everything above them collapses. It's not theoretical anymore. It's happening. Now. After my presentation, during Q&A, a young woman, couldn't have been more than 22, raised her hand. She had tears in her eyes. She asked, Dr. Chen, is there any hope at all? Any scenario where we avoid complete ecosystem collapse? I opened my mouth to give her the standard academic answer. Well, if we achieve immediate, drastic emissions reductions and implement large-scale carbon capture. But the words died in my throat. Because I didn't believe them. I hadn't believed them for years. I was just saying what you're supposed to say to avoid being accused of defeatism, of demoralizing people, of being a bad scientist who lets despair contaminate objectivity. But standing there, looking at this young woman who reminded me of myself 20 years ago, full of passion, wanting to dedicate her life to saving the planet, I couldn't lie to her. I said, honestly, I don't know anymore. The models all point to catastrophic tipping cascades. We might have already crossed points of no return. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you something different. The room went silent. You could feel the shock, the discomfort. After the session, 3 senior colleagues pulled me aside. Sarah, you can't say things like that publicly. You'll demoralize people. You'll make them give up. You have a responsibility to maintain hope, even if you personally feel hopeless. But I was done pretending. I told them I needed time off. I stopped answering emails. I stopped going to the lab. I sat in my apartment for 2 weeks, staring at the wall, drinking, sleeping 12 hours a day. Not because I was tired, but because being unconscious was better than being awake. And then, one night, I made a decision. I packed a bag, got in my car, drove north up the coast to a place David and I had visited once, years ago, a remote cabin on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. We'd gone there for our anniversary, spent 3 days with no phones, no internet, just us and the ocean. It was the last time I remembered feeling at peace. I rented the cabin for a week, told no one where I was going, left my phone in the car, turned off. And I gave myself a deadline, 7 days to decide if I wanted to keep living. I wasn't actively suicidal. I wasn't going to hurt myself. But I needed to know if there was any reason to keep going. Any meaning in any of this. Because from where I stood, watching the planet die, watching my life's work amount to nothing, living in a world where the person I loved most was killed by the very thing we'd spent our careers warning people about, I couldn't find one. The first 2 days, I barely left the cabin. I slept. I sat on the porch. I watched the ocean, which looked beautiful and perfect and completely indifferent to the fact that it was dying from the inside out. On the 3rd night, this was the night, I walked out to the cliff edge at sunset. It was late October, so the sun was setting early, maybe 6:30. The air was cool, that particular Northern California coastal chill that goes right through you. Fog was starting to roll in from the north. The waves were crashing against the rocks below, steady and rhythmic, the way they'd been crashing for millions of years and would probably keep crashing long after humans were gone. I sat down on the edge, legs dangling over, and I just let go. Not physically, I didn't jump. But mentally, emotionally, I stopped fighting. Stopped trying to figure it out. Stopped trying to find meaning. Stopped trying to be strong or professional or okay. I whispered into the wind, not to God. I didn't believe in God. But to nothing, to everything, to the universe that seemed so indifferent to suffering. I don't know what to do anymore. I can't save anything. I can't even save myself. I'm so tired. I'm so fucking tired. And I cried. Not the pretty kind of crying. The ugly kind, where your whole body shakes and you can't breathe and snot is running down your face and you don't care because there's no one there to see you fall apart. I cried for David. For the reefs. For that young woman at the conference who wanted hope I couldn't give her. For my father, who died thinking his daughter would protect the ocean he loved. For myself, for the 20 years I'd spent trying and failing and watching it all slip away. And when I finally stopped crying, when I'd emptied myself out completely, I felt nothing. Not peace. Not despair. Just nothing. An absolute hollow quiet. I sat there as the sun disappeared below the horizon. As the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue. As the first stars started to appear. And I thought, with complete clarity and no emotion at all, I could just stop. I could just be done. And nothing would change. The ocean would keep dying. The climate would keep breaking down. The world would keep spinning. And maybe that's okay. Maybe I'm not supposed to save anything. Maybe I'm just supposed to let go. I didn't know it then, but that moment, that complete surrender, that absolute admission of powerlessness, sent a signal. Not through space, exactly, but through something deeper. Through the quantum field that connects all consciousness everywhere. I'd stopped fighting. Stopped pretending. Stopped running from the truth of my own helplessness. And when you finally do that, when you hit absolute bottom with complete honesty, the universe has a way of responding. I first noticed the light maybe 20 minutes after sunset. The sky was almost fully dark now, just a faint glow in the west. But out over the ocean, maybe half a mile from shore, there was something bright. At first, I assumed it was a ship. Fishing boat. Maybe. But the light was wrong. Too bright. Too steady. And it wasn't sitting on the water. It was above it. Maybe 30 feet in the air. I watched it for a few seconds, my brain trying to fit it into familiar categories. Helicopter? No sound. Drone? Too big. Too far out. Flare? Not moving like a flare. And then it moved. Not like a ship or aircraft moves. It moved at angles that didn't make sense. Instant acceleration from stillness to high speed. A 90-degree turn at full velocity. A dead stop hanging in midair. My scientist brain engaged despite my emotional numbness. That's not possible. Physics doesn't allow that. G-forces would destroy any pilot. No human technology can move like that. The light was getting closer. Fast. Coming toward the cliff. Toward me. Part of me thought I should run. Part of me thought I should be terrified. But the largest part of me, the part that had just decided life might not be worth continuing, thought, hey, this would be a fitting way to die. Killed by a UFO. At least it would be interesting. So I didn't move. I just sat there, watching this impossible light approach. It stopped maybe 50 feet offshore, hovering about 20 feet above the waves. I could see it clearly now. It wasn't a light source, it was a craft that was producing light, or maybe was made of light. I don't know how to describe it. The shape was organic, almost like a teardrop or a seed, maybe 15 feet long. The surface looked liquid, like mercury, reflecting the last bit of twilight but also glowing from within with this soft blue-white bioluminescence. As I watched, the glow intensified. And then, without a sound, without any visible mechanism, the craft opened. Like a flower blooming, the surface just peeled back, revealing an interior that I couldn't quite see clearly from where I was sitting. And a figure emerged. I stopped breathing. It was humanoid. 2 arms, 2 legs, standing upright. But it was definitely not human. It was tall, if I had to guess, maybe 7 feet. Proportions were wrong. Too thin, too elongated. And it was glowing. The same soft light as the craft, like it was lit from the inside. The figure stepped out of the craft, and I mean stepped, like it was stepping onto solid ground, except there was no ground. It was walking on air. Or the air was solid under its feet. Or physics had just decided to take a break. It walked across the space between the craft and the cliff, moving with this fluid grace that was beautiful and deeply unsettling. It reached the cliff edge about 10 feet to my right, stepped onto solid ground, turned to face me, and I finally got a clear look. The skin, if you could call it that, was pale, almost translucent, with a faint golden undertone. The face was smooth, no visible nose, just slight indentations where nostrils might be. The mouth was small, barely noticeable. But the eyes were enormous, taking up maybe a third of the face. Almond-shaped, but larger than any human eyes. And they weren't black like in the movies. They were golden, the same color as the skin but brighter, more intense. And when those eyes looked at me, I felt something that I can't quite explain. Like I was being seen, not just physically, but completely. Every thought, every feeling, every secret I'd ever kept. I should have been terrified. Every survival instinct should have been screaming. But all I felt was recognition. Like seeing someone I'd forgotten I knew. Like coming home after being lost for a long time. We stared at each other for maybe 30 seconds. Then, a voice. Not out loud. Inside my head. Clear as my own thoughts but distinctly not mine. Calm, gentle, but carrying weight. Sarah Chen. You called. We heard. And I came because I need you to know something humanity has forgotten. My mouth was dry. My heart was pounding now, no longer numb. I managed to croak out, "What are you?" The being tilted its head slightly, studying me. A survivor. From a world that made the mistakes yours is making. I'm here because Earth is critical. And you specifically, you need to understand why. I tried to process this. My rational mind was throwing up every possible explanation. Hallucination. Stress-induced psychotic break. Carbon monoxide poisoning from the cabin's heater. Elaborate hoax. Government psychological operation. Literally anything that fit into the worldview I'd spent 47 years building, where aliens weren't real and consciousness was just brain chemistry and the universe was random and meaningless. But sitting there, looking at this impossible being standing on the cliff in the twilight, I couldn't make myself believe any of those explanations. The quality of the experience was wrong. Too crisp. Too real. Too specific. Are you real? I asked. My voice sounded small and stupid even to me. The being extended a hand. Long fingers, 4 of them plus a thumb. The hand was glowing softly in the gathering dark. Touch my hand. Feel for yourself. I hesitated. This was the moment. Touch it and commit to the possibility that everything I knew was incomplete. Or refuse, stand up, walk away, preserve my existing worldview intact. But what was the point of preserving a worldview that had led me to a cliff edge considering whether to keep living? What was I protecting? I reached out. My hand looked small and very human next to that elongated golden hand. I touched it. Solid. Warm. There was a slight electric tingle, like touching a low-voltage battery. Real. Undeniably, impossibly real. I pulled my hand back, breathing fast now. Okay. I don't understand this. I don't understand how this is possible. But, okay. What do you want me to know? The being's large golden eyes seemed to soften somehow, though the face didn't move much. Come aboard my vessel. What I need to show you requires seeing, not just telling. Fear spiked then. Go into the alien craft? That's when people disappear, get abducted, get probed or experimented on, never come back. Every movie, every book, every story about alien contact was screaming at me. Don't go. I said, why should I trust you? You shouldn't, the being replied simply. Trust is earned, not freely given. But Sarah, you came to this cliff tonight to decide if you wanted to keep living. Whatever I show you, It cannot be worse than the conclusion you'd already reached. The truth of that hit me like cold water. This thing knew. Somehow it knew exactly why I was here, exactly what I was contemplating. And it was right. What did I have to lose? If I go with you, I said, my voice steadier now, will you bring me back? Yes. Before dawn. You have my word. How do I know your word means anything? You don't. That's where trust comes in. Or in your case, where having nothing left to lose comes in. I almost laughed. Dark humor from an alien. Somehow that made it feel more real. I stood up slowly. My legs were shaky, adrenaline and hours of sitting making them stiff. Okay. Show me whatever you need to show me. I'm listening. The being turned and began walking back toward the craft. I followed, feeling completely surreal. I was walking behind an alien. An actual alien. After 20 years of studying science, of operating within strict materialist paradigms, of believing that anyone who claimed to see UFOs was either lying or deluded, here I was, following one across a cliff in Northern California. We reached the edge. The craft was still hovering there. Maybe 5 feet away. Impossible, but there. The being stepped off the cliff, onto air, and walked to the craft. It turned back and extended a hand. The field extends here. You won't fall. I looked down. 50 feet to rocks and crashing waves. Every instinct screamed not to step off a cliff. But I'd already decided, hadn't I? I'd decided when I touched that hand. I'd decided when I chose to listen. I stepped off the edge. My foot landed on something solid but invisible. Like stepping onto thick glass. I could see through it to the water below, but it held my weight perfectly. I took another step, then another, walking on nothing toward the impossible craft. The being helped me through the opening. And I stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the space was wrong. The craft looked maybe 15 feet long from outside. Inside, it was at least 30 feet across. The walls curved up into a ceiling I couldn't quite see clearly. It seemed to recede, like the space went up further than it should. The walls themselves were alive. Not literally, but they pulsed very gently, like breathing. The texture was organic, smooth but with patterns that moved when I wasn't looking directly at them. Bioluminescent light came from everywhere and nowhere. Soft blue-white that didn't cast shadows. In the center of the space was something between a console and an altar. A curved surface that looked like it was made of water frozen mid-ripple. But it was solid. Lights moved under the surface. Not lights, information. Symbols, patterns, data flowing. I felt the craft move, but I didn't feel acceleration. No G-forces, no inertia. We were just suddenly somewhere else. Moving somewhere else. I looked through the walls, which were transparent when I wanted them to be, and saw we were ascending. The cliff was falling away below us. The ocean spreading out. The coastline becoming visible. Where are we going? My voice sounded strange, muffled somehow. Not far. Just high enough for privacy. So we can talk without interruption. We stabilized about 1,000 feet up, hovering over the ocean. Through the transparent sections of wall, I could see lights from the coastal highway to the east, the darkness of the Pacific stretching west forever. The being stood across from me, on the other side of the console. Now that I could see clearly in the interior light, I noticed more details. It wore something, not clothes exactly, but a covering that looked more like a second skin. The body was thin but not frail. There was a sense of strength in the way it moved. And those eyes, always coming back to those eyes. Looking at me with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. I know you have questions, the being said, the voice still inside my head, not through ears. Where I'm from, what I want, why you. I'll answer them. But first, I need to establish something important. You're trying very hard right now to believe this is a hallucination. Your rational mind is fighting for survival. So let me remove all doubt. Before I could respond, the being placed one hand on my shoulder. Not the same electric tingle as before. This was different. A wave of something, warmth, clarity, expansion, moved through my entire body. starting from that hand, spreading through my chest, down my arms and legs, up into my head. And suddenly, I could feel. Not my body, the craft. I could feel its systems humming, its awareness registering my presence. And beyond the craft, I could feel the ocean below, not as water but as living presence. And beyond that, billions of points of awareness. Every living thing within range, from the smallest plankton to a whale passing miles to the north, all of it present, all of it conscious, all of it connected. The hand lifted. The expanded awareness faded but didn't disappear completely. I was left with an echo of it, a knowing that consciousness was far, far more than I'd understood. I was crying. Again. But not from grief this time. From awe, from terror, from relief. From finally experiencing something that proved I wasn't just a meat robot in a meaningless universe. That, the being said gently, was a temporary expansion of your perceptual field. You felt what I feel normally. Connection to all life. And now you know, beyond doubt, beyond rationalization, that consciousness is not generated by brain tissue. It exists independently. You just experienced it. So can we proceed without you questioning whether this is real? I nodded, unable to speak. My whole body was shaking. Not from fear. From the overwhelming significance of what I'd just felt. Good, the being said. Now I'll tell you who I am, where I'm from, and why your species might be the most important thing happening in the galaxy right now. But Sarah, I warn you, what I'm about to reveal will challenge every assumption you've made about Earth, about humanity's role in the cosmos, and about why your despair is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what's actually happening here. Are you ready? I wiped my face with the back of my hand, took a deep breath, and said the only thing I could say, show me. The being moved its hand over the console. The liquid crystal surface responded, lights intensifying. And then the air in the center of the chamber began to shimmer and shift. Three-dimensional images formed, so real I thought I could touch them. A holographic projection, except infinitely more sophisticated than anything human technology had achieved. I saw a planet. Not Earth. The sun in the sky was wrong. Too red, too large. The landscape below looked alien but beautiful. Cities that looked grown rather than built. Organic spires and flowing architecture. Vegetation in shades of purple and red instead of green. And beings, dozens of them, moving through spaces that looked peaceful, harmonious, almost utopian. This, the being said, is my homeworld. Or was. 40 light-years from here. We call it. The being made a sound that I couldn't reproduce, something between a musical chord and a feeling. Your language doesn't have a word. But in your terms, it means something like place of eternal peace. I watched the hologram shift, showing different scenes. The beings moved with grace, interacting with what looked like advanced technology that was seamlessly integrated into natural environments. No pollution, no obvious conflict. Everything appeared serene, balanced. We achieved everything your scientists dream of, the being continued. Clean, unlimited energy. Abundant resources. Disease eliminated. Extended lifespans. Most of us live thousands of your years. Telepathic communication. So no misunderstanding, no lies. Perfect social harmony through collective consciousness. And most importantly, we achieved peace. Absolute peace. No war, no crime, no violence of any kind. That sounds. I hesitated. That sounds like paradise. Does it? The being's voice carried something I couldn't quite identify. Sadness? Regret? Watch what happens. The hologram continued forward through time. I could somehow sense the time compression, years passing in seconds. The civilization remained the same. Beautiful. Peaceful. Unchanging. Decades turned to centuries. Centuries to millennia. And nothing changed. The same activities. The same patterns. Like watching a recording on loop. Do you see the problem, Sarah? I stared at the unchanging paradise. And slowly, I began to understand. Nothing's happening. It's static. Exactly. We achieved peace by transcending conflict. We achieved health by eliminating disease. We achieved abundance by perfecting resource management. And in doing so, we eliminated every driver of growth, of evolution, of change. The hologram shifted to show a closer view. A being, maybe the one standing before me, I couldn't tell, sitting alone in a beautiful garden, surrounded by perfect tranquility. But there was something in its posture, in the way it held itself. Emptiness. The same emptiness I'd felt sitting on that cliff. Without challenge, without struggle, without the friction that forces adaptation and growth, we stagnated. Our technology continued advancing incrementally, but our consciousness stopped evolving entirely. We became comfortable, complacent. We existed, but we weren't truly alive. We had transcended suffering, but in doing so, we'd lost the capacity for genuine joy. We'd achieved immortality, but existence had lost its meaning. The hologram faded. The being looked at me directly. Sarah, we spent 10,000 of your years in that state. Beautiful, peaceful, dead inside. And then, finally, our greatest scientists and philosophers reached a devastating conclusion. Our civilization had become an evolutionary dead end. We would exist forever, but we would never grow again. We had climbed to the summit of development and found it was a plateau with no way forward. I tried to process this. So, what did you do? We did what any dying culture does when it realizes it's dying. We looked outward. We sent survey ships across the galaxy, searching for a solution. Searching for something we'd lost but couldn't name. We studied hundreds of inhabited worlds, thousands of civilizations at various stages of development. Most were like us, advanced, peaceful, stagnant. A few were like old Earth, primitive and violent. But then, the hologram activated again. And I saw Earth, my Earth, rotating slowly in space, blue and white and green and brown, achingly beautiful against the black of space. Then we found this world, Earth. And Sarah, everything changed. Because we saw something here that we'd never seen anywhere else in our explorations. Something that gave us hope for the first time in millennia. My breath caught. What did you see? The being leaned forward slightly, and I could feel the intensity of what it was about to say. We saw a species doing the impossible. We saw consciousness evolving rapidly through the densest, harshest conditions imaginable. We saw souls choosing to incarnate into bodies that age and die, into a world filled with suffering and conflict and darkness. And we saw them transforming. We saw them taking their pain and creating art. Taking their fear and choosing courage. Taking their isolation and building connection. We saw alchemy, Sarah. The transformation of lead into gold, of darkness into light, of suffering into wisdom. We saw what we'd lost. The engine of evolution. The fire that refines consciousness. The very thing we'd eliminated in our pursuit of peace. I shook my head. But we're destroying ourselves. Climate collapse, mass extinction, endless wars. How is that something to admire? Because you're still growing. The being's voice rose slightly, the first real emotion I'd heard. Yes, you're making catastrophic mistakes. Yes, you're destroying your environment. Yes, you're trapped in cycles of violence and ignorance. But Sarah, you're also waking up. Against impossible odds, despite all the forces pulling you toward destruction, you're evolving. Individual by individual, choice by choice, you're raising your consciousness. And that struggle, that daily choice to love when hate would be easier, to hope when despair seems rational, to grow when stagnation is comfortable, that is the most precious thing in the galaxy. The hologram zoomed in on Earth, showing countless points of light. The being explained, each light is a human who has chosen consciousness over unconsciousness, who has faced their own darkness and chosen to transform it, who has felt the agony of existence in dense matter and used it as fuel for growth instead of excuse for giving up. These people, millions of them now, growing exponentially, they are teaching the universe something it had forgotten. They are demonstrating that evolution through suffering is possible. They are showing that darkness is not the enemy, but the forge where light becomes strong enough to matter. I felt tears on my face again. The being was describing me. It was describing everyone who'd ever struggled and kept trying. Everyone who'd ever faced climate grief and continued working anyway. Everyone who'd ever lost someone and found meaning in the loss. Everyone who'd ever been broken and done the hard work of healing. So you're saying? I struggled to find words. You're saying Earth matters? Humanity matters? Not despite our struggles, but because of them. Sarah. The being's voice was gentle but firm. I'm saying Earth isn't the galaxy's problem child. Earth is the galaxy's last hope. Those words hit me like a physical force. The galaxy's last hope. I don't understand, I said. You're advanced. You have technology beyond anything we can imagine. How could you possibly need us? Because technology solves nothing without consciousness evolution. We learned that too late. The being gestured and the hologram shifted again. Now I saw that paradise world in crisis. The beautiful cities were still there, but something was wrong. The beings were fading somehow, losing cohesion. The telepathic collective that held them together was breaking down. About 500 of your years ago, we began experiencing something we'd never encountered: spiritual death. Not physical death. Our bodies were essentially immortal. But the consciousness inhabiting those bodies began dissolving, losing individuation, merging back into undifferentiated source energy. Not because it was time, but because existence had become so meaningless that consciousness itself was giving up. At first, it was slow. One being here, one there. We thought it was a choice, a return to source. But then it accelerated. Hundreds, then thousands. And we realized, without challenge, without purpose, without the friction of growth, consciousness itself was dying of boredom. The immortality we'd achieved had become a prison. The peace we'd created had become a tomb. I stared at the dissolving civilization, feeling horror and recognition simultaneously. What happened? We sent out a desperate call across dimensions, across timelines, to any consciousness that might have answers. And we received, not an answer, but a direction. A pointing toward Earth. Toward your species. Toward the very suffering we'd worked so hard to transcend. The being paused, those golden eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made me shiver. Sarah, we came here thinking we might teach you. Save you from destroying yourselves. Share our technology, our peace, our wisdom. We came as potential saviors. But when we truly observed you, when we felt into your collective consciousness and saw what you were doing, the impossible work of transforming trauma into wisdom, of choosing love in the face of hate, of creating beauty in the midst of chaos, we realized something that shattered our understanding of evolution. We realized we weren't here to save you. We were here to learn from you. Because you are doing what we couldn't. You are maintaining connection to source, to divine consciousness, through dense matter, through suffering, through limitation. You are alchemists. And the galaxy desperately needs to understand how you do it. The hologram faded. We were alone again in the softly glowing chamber. And everything I thought I knew about humanity's place in the universe had just inverted. We weren't the underdeveloped species waiting for advanced aliens to save us. We were the teachers. We were the ones holding something precious that the rest of the galaxy had lost. And suddenly, my 20 years of watching reefs die, my grief over David's death, my despair about climate collapse, it all looked different. Not smaller. Still devastating. But meaningful in a way I'd never imagined. I need to show you more, the being said. I need to show you exactly how this works. How individual consciousness affects collective reality. How your personal healing literally heals the planet. How the work you think is meaningless is actually the most significant thing happening in the cosmos right now. Are you ready to go deeper, Sarah? I wiped my face, took a shaky breath, and nodded. Then we begin with the hardest truth of all. The truth about why Earth looks like it's dying, and what that really means. The being moved to the side of the chamber where the wall became completely transparent. I could see Earth below us now. We'd moved higher without me noticing. The curve of the planet was visible. City lights scattered across the darkened hemisphere like glowing constellations. "Look at your world, Sarah," the being said. "What do you see?" I looked. From up here, Earth was breathtaking. The thin blue line of atmosphere. The swirl of clouds over the Pacific. The lights of human civilization dotting the darkness. But I knew what lay beneath that beauty. The dying reefs. The acidifying oceans. The melting ice. The sixth mass extinction unfolding in real time. "I see a planet in crisis," I said quietly. "I see ecosystems collapsing. I see a biosphere being destroyed by the dominant species. I see my life's work documenting failure." "Yes," the being said. "That's what you see. Now I'm going to show you what's actually happening. And Sarah, I warn you, this will challenge everything you believe about cause and effect, about consciousness and matter, about how reality actually works." The being touched the console again. The hologram reactivated, but this time it showed something different. Earth, but not just the physical planet. There was another layer visible now, a field of energy surrounding and interpenetrating the physical world. It looked like aurora borealis colors, but more complex. Waves and currents of light flowing around the planet, through it, shifting in patterns that seemed almost alive. "What am I looking at?" I asked. "The consciousness field of Earth. What some of your traditions call the noosphere, the sphere of human thought. Every thought, every emotion, every belief of every human creates ripples in this field. And this field, Sarah, directly affects physical matter." I wanted to object, to say that was pseudoscience, but I'd already felt the connection of all consciousness when the being had touched me earlier. I'd felt how everything was linked. So instead I asked, "How does it work?" "Your quantum physicists have already discovered the foundation," the being explained. "The observer effect. The double-slit experiment. Consciousness affects matter at the quantum level. But your science hasn't fully grasped the implications yet. It's not just laboratory observations that collapse wave functions. It's every observation, every thought, every focus of consciousness. You are all, constantly, collapsing quantum possibilities into physical actualities." The hologram zoomed in, showing specific areas of the consciousness field. Some areas were bright, high-frequency waves of light. Other areas were dark, dense, slow-moving clouds of shadow. The bright areas, the being continued, represent high-frequency consciousness. Love, gratitude, hope, compassion, creative joy. These frequencies literally organize matter into coherent, life-supporting patterns. The dark areas represent low-frequency consciousness. Fear, hatred, despair, greed, separation. These frequencies create chaos, dissolution, destruction. I stared at the map. The dark areas were larger, more widespread. They concentrated heavily over certain regions, war zones, areas of extreme poverty, industrial zones. And right now, the being said, humanity's collective consciousness field is heavily weighted toward fear and separation. This isn't a moral judgment, Sarah. It's a frequency measurement. And this low-frequency field is directly creating the physical conditions you call climate crisis, ecological collapse, social breakdown. Wait, I said, my scientific training rebelling. Climate change is caused by carbon emissions. That's physics, chemistry, not consciousness. Why did humans create systems that emit carbon? The being asked patiently. Because of industrialization, economic structures, fossil fuel dependence. And why did humans create those economic structures? I paused. Because of greed, short-term thinking, inability to see long-term consequences. And what are greed, short-term thinking, and inability to see consequences symptoms of? I saw where this was going. Low consciousness, separation thinking, fear-based behavior. Exactly. Your climate crisis isn't separate from your consciousness crisis. It's a direct manifestation of it. Humanity has been operating at a frequency of separation, seeing yourselves as separate from nature, separate from each other, separate from source. And that frequency of separation creates separation in physical reality. Ecosystems separate from balance. Atmospheric systems separate from stability. You are manifesting your internal state externally. The hologram shifted, showing the consciousness field at different points in history. Thousands of years ago, it was brighter overall, more balanced. Then industrialization, a massive darkening. World wars, nearly black in places. But then, starting around the 1960s, small points of light began appearing. Growing. Spreading. This, the being said, pointing to the spreading light, is the awakening. Individual humans remembering their connection to Source. Choosing love over fear. Raising their personal frequency. And Sarah, every single point of light affects the entire field. This is not metaphor. This is measurable, observable phenomenon. So you're saying, I struggled to articulate it. You're saying if enough humans raise their consciousness, the physical planet will heal? That sounds like magical thinking. It sounds like magical thinking because your science has divorced consciousness from matter, the being replied. But they were never separate. Matter is consciousness at its slowest vibration. Consciousness is matter at its highest vibration. Change the consciousness, and you must change the matter. It's law, like gravity. Your planet doesn't need technological salvation. It needs consciousness evolution. I thought about my 20 years in marine biology. All the technology we'd developed. Coral restoration techniques. Artificial reefs. Genetic interventions. None of it had worked at scale. Because we were treating symptoms, not cause. How many? I asked. How many humans need to raise their consciousness before the field shifts enough to reverse the collapse? Critical mass, the being said, is approximately 51%. When 51% of your species operates consistently at high frequency, love, gratitude, unity consciousness, the collective field tips. And when the field tips, physical reality must reorganize to match. Your oceans will begin healing. Your climate will stabilize. Your ecosystems will regenerate. Not because of technology, but because the consciousness field that was creating destruction will have shifted to creating restoration. 51%. I did quick math. 8 billion humans. That meant roughly 4 billion people needed to awaken. That's impossible. Most people don't even believe consciousness affects reality. It was impossible, the being said. 50 years ago, less than 1% of humans were awake. 20 years ago, maybe 5%. Today, the hologram updated, showing the current state. Bright points of light had spread significantly. Today, you're at approximately 37%. Growing exponentially. I stared at the map. 37%. More than a third of humanity was already awakening, even if they didn't know it in those terms. People meditating. People choosing compassion. People doing inner work. People healing trauma. People choosing love despite every reason to choose fear. You're close, Sarah. Closer than you realize. This is why we're watching so intently. This is why we call Earth the galaxy's last hope. Because you're approaching critical mass. And when you reach it, when the field tips, you will demonstrate to the entire universe that conscious evolution through dense matter is possible. You will become a template, a teaching, a living proof that darkness can be transformed into light. But what if we don't make it? The question came out as a whisper. What if we don't reach 51% before the physical systems collapse completely? The being was quiet for a moment. That is the question, isn't it? That's why your individual choice matters so much. Every single human who chooses to do the inner work, who chooses to raise their frequency, who chooses love over fear, each one tips the balance closer. You are not insignificant, Sarah. You are critical. You personally. Me? I'm one person. I'm not even. You're not just anything, the being interrupted firmly. You're a consciousness that chose to incarnate on Earth specifically to participate in this transformation. Before you were born, before you had this body, your soul knew this lifetime would be intense. You knew you'd face despair, loss, grief. And you chose it anyway because you wanted to be here for this. For the moment when humanity decides whether to ascend or collapse. I felt something crack open in my chest. The idea that I'd chosen this. That David's death, the reef collapse, my depression. That I'd somehow agreed to experience all of it because it would refine me into someone who could contribute to this transformation. It was too much and exactly right simultaneously. I don't feel important, I said, tears flowing again. I feel broken. You're not broken, the being said gently. You're breaking open. There's a difference. And Sarah, I need to show you something about that brokenness. About the parts of yourself you've rejected, the parts you think are weaknesses. Because those parts are actually your greatest gifts. Are you ready to look at what you've been running from? I thought about the cliff. About the numbness. About the 20 years of suppressed grief and rage and fear that I tried to outrun through work, through activism, through being professional and objective and scientific. I don't want to, I admitted. But I need to. Then close your eyes, the being said. I'm going to guide you through something we call shadow integration. It's a process that happens naturally in higher dimensions, but humans in dense matter need assistance accessing it. I'm going to help you see what you've been refusing to see about yourself. And then, if you're willing, we're going to transform it. Together. I closed my eyes. My heart was racing. Every instinct screamed to run, to refuse, to stay safe in my numbness. But I'd come this far. I'd stepped off a cliff onto invisible ground. I'd entered an alien craft. I'd watched my entire worldview reconstruct itself. What was one more impossible thing? I'm ready, I said. And the being placed its hand on my heart. Everything disappeared. I was in darkness. Complete, absolute darkness. Not the darkness of a room with no lights. The darkness of void. Of nothing. Then I heard my own voice. But younger. The voice I had when I was 7 years old. Daddy, look. The fish. They're so pretty. I was suddenly there, in the memory. My father taking me snorkeling for the first time off La Jolla. The underwater world exploding into view. Parrotfish and tangs and angels. Colors I didn't know existed. And my father's hand, holding mine, keeping me safe as I discovered magic. This is where it started, the being's voice said, but I couldn't see it. It was just voice in the darkness. Your love. Your calling. Remember how it felt. I felt it. Pure joy. Wonder. The certainty that the ocean was the most beautiful thing in existence and I would spend my life protecting it. The memory dissolved. Another appeared. I was 19. At my father's funeral. Standing at the edge of the grave. Unable to cry because if I started I'd never stop. And I made a vow, silently, desperately. I'll protect what you loved, Dad. I promise. I'll make you proud. This is where the wound formed, the being said. Not from your father's death, but from the vow you made. The promise you believed you had to keep. The burden you thought you had to carry alone. Another memory. My first bleaching event. Swimming through the reef I'd studied for years, watching it die in front of me. Coming up gasping, tearing off my mask, vomiting seawater and grief. This is where the failure began, I heard myself say. My adult voice, heavy with judgment. I couldn't save them. I wasn't good enough. I broke my promise to Dad. No, the being's voice was firm. This is where you began carrying guilt that was never yours to carry. Listen to what you told yourself that day. I heard it. My internal voice, vicious and cruel. You're failing. You're not doing enough. Your father would be ashamed. You're worthless if you can't save anything. More memories cascaded. Every reef that died. Every paper that showed worse projections. Every conference where I presented doom and watched hope die in people's eyes. And under it all, that voice, failure. Worthless. Not enough. You should be able to save them. Why can't you save them? And then David. The hurricane. The phone call. The body. The funeral. And the voice reaching a crescendo, you can't save anything. Everyone you love dies. Everything you touch turns to death. You should have died instead of him. You should have been good enough to prevent this somehow. You failed. 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 I was drowning in it. 20 years of accumulated self-hatred, all hitting at once. I wanted to run, to escape, to go back to numbness. Stay, the being commanded. Don't run. This is the shadow. This is what you've been carrying. Look at it. All of it. So I looked. And I saw something I'd never seen before. I saw that the voice wasn't true. It was just a voice. A pattern I'd created at 19 when my father died. A pattern that had grown stronger every time something bad happened, until I believed it was reality rather than just thought. Where did this voice come from? The being asked. From me, I said. No. From a part of you. A wounded part. A part that formed when you were young and afraid and didn't know how to process loss. Let me show you that part. The darkness shifted. And I saw her. Little Sarah. 7 years old. Sitting alone in her room after learning her father was sick. Holding her stuffed dolphin. Crying silently because she didn't want to bother her mother who was already so sad. And little Sarah was whispering to herself, if I'm really good. If I'm really smart. If I do everything perfect. Maybe I can fix it. Maybe I can save him. Maybe I can be good enough. My heart broke. Because I saw it. That little girl had decided that love meant preventing loss. That being good enough meant having power over death. That failure to save meant failure to love. And she'd carried that impossible burden for 40 years. Talk to her, the being said gently. Tell her what she needs to hear. I knelt down in the memory. I looked at little Sarah, tears streaming down both our faces. And I said the words I'd needed someone to say 40 years ago. Sweetheart, it's not your job to save everyone. You're 7 years old. You're not supposed to be powerful enough to stop death. Your love is enough exactly as it is. You don't have to earn it by being perfect. You don't have to prove it by preventing loss. You are enough. You've always been enough. I love you. Little Sarah looked up at me. But Daddy died. Yes. And I couldn't stop it. No one could. Honey. Death isn't something you fail to prevent. It's part of life. And loving someone doesn't mean you can control what happens to them. It just means you care. And you care so much. You've always cared so much. That caring is your gift, not your failure. So I'm not bad. No. Baby, you're not bad. You never were. You're just a little girl who loves her daddy. And that love doesn't disappear because he died. It stays. It grows. It becomes your purpose. But it's not a burden. It's a gift. Little Sarah dissolved into tears. Not sad tears. Relief tears. And as she cried, she began to glow. Soft golden light, the same color as the being's skin. She stood up, walked toward me, and then merged with me. Became part of me again, but transformed. Integrated. Healed. The scene shifted. Now I was standing in front of myself. Adult Sarah. The version of me that had been carrying all that guilt and self-hatred for 20 years. She looked exhausted. Beaten down. Empty. Tell her too, the being said. I looked at her, at me, and said, I forgive you. I looked up, shocked. For what? For everything you think you failed at. For David's death. For the reef's dying. For not being superhuman. For being tired. For wanting to give up. For being human. I forgive you. I release you. You don't have to carry this anymore. Adult Sarah began to glow too. Brighter and brighter. And then she also walked toward me and merged. And I felt it physically. A massive weight lifting from my chest, from my shoulders, from my entire body. Lightness I hadn't felt in decades. Since before my father died. Since before I learned the world could be lost despite best efforts. I opened my eyes. I was back in the ship. The being's hand was still on my chest. I was sobbing, but they were good tears. Clean tears. Healing tears. That, the being said softly, removing its hand, is shadow integration. That's the inner work that changes everything. What you just did, forgiving yourself, releasing the burden you were never meant to carry, integrating the rejected part, that raised your frequency measurably. I can see it in your field. You're lighter now. Brighter. I could feel it. I felt different. Not healed completely. There was more work to do, I could sense that. But fundamentally shifted. Like something that had been twisted had straightened. Something that had been broken had been set properly to heal. And Sarah, the being continued, what you just experienced, that shift in your consciousness, literally just affected the planetary field. You raised your frequency. The field responded. Somewhere on Earth right now, someone you'll never meet just felt a little lighter, a little more hopeful, for no reason they can explain. Because you healed. Because you chose love over self-hatred. Because you integrated your shadow. That's how it works. I asked, my voice raw from crying. One person at a time. One person at a time. One choice at a time. One moment of forgiveness, of compassion, of choosing differently. And it compounds. It spreads. It multiplies. This is how humanity reaches critical mass. Not through grand gestures or technological fixes. Through billions of small, brave choices to heal. To integrate. To transform darkness into light. I sat there, feeling the truth of it in my body. This was real. More real than anything I'd learned in 20 years of academic training. More real than any data set or research paper. I'd just experienced conscious transformation of my own energy, and I could feel the difference. I want to teach this, I said suddenly. I want to show people how to do this. How to heal their shadows. How to raise their frequency. How to participate in the transformation instead of just watching the collapse. Yes, the being said, and I could hear pleasure in its voice. That's why you were called here tonight. Not just to heal yourself, but to become a teacher. To pass on what you've learned. To help others find their own path to integration. Sarah, you're going to leave this craft different than when you entered. And that difference will affect everyone you encounter. Some consciously, some unconsciously. But you'll be carrying a higher frequency, and frequency is contagious. But I still don't know. I hesitated. I still don't know the practical steps. Shadow work is one thing. But daily life? How do I maintain this when I go back? When the news is terrible and the data still shows collapse and people are still asleep? That's what I'm going to teach you now, the being said. The practical mechanics of conscious living. The specific practices that maintain high frequency despite challenging external circumstances. The daily disciplines that compound into transformation. Are you ready for the final teaching? Yes, I said without hesitation. Show me everything. The being moved back to the console. I'm going to teach you what we call the 5 pillars of conscious living. These aren't rules. They're tools. Practices that, when done consistently, maintain high frequency and accelerate evolution. They work whether you believe in them or not, because they're based on how consciousness actually operates, not on belief systems. A holographic display appeared, showing 5 columns of light, each a different color. First pillar, gratitude as foundation. The being explained, every morning, before you do anything else, before phone, before news, before your mind fills with the day's concerns, you deliberately choose 3 things you're genuinely grateful for. Not things you think you should be grateful for, things you actually feel gratitude toward. But what if I'm depressed? I asked. What if I can't feel grateful? Then you start smaller. Gratitude for breath. For a comfortable bed. For hot water. For coffee. Start with sensory experiences if emotions are blocked. The key is feeling it in your body, not just thinking it. When you feel gratitude, even for small things, your body releases specific neurochemicals. Dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. These chemicals alter your physiology, which alters your energy field, which affects the quantum field around you. The first pillar glowed brighter in the hologram. This isn't spiritual bypassing, the being continued. You're not pretending problems don't exist. You're deliberately choosing to start your day by programming your consciousness toward receptivity and appreciation rather than fear and lack. It sets the frequency for everything that follows. Second pillar, conscious intention. After gratitude, you set intention for the day. Not goals, intention. Not I will accomplish X, Y, Z instead. Today, I choose to be frequency of peace. Or love. Or compassion. Or presence. Whatever quality you want to embody. You state it clearly, then feel what it would feel like to be that frequency throughout the day. Why does this matter? I asked. Because intention focuses consciousness. You have approximately 60,000 thoughts per day. Most humans let those thoughts run on autopilot, reacting to external circumstances. Setting conscious intention gives those thoughts a direction, a purpose. You're programming yourself rather than letting the world program you. The second pillar, illuminated. Third pillar, thought vigilance. Throughout the day, you practice noticing your thoughts. Not controlling them, noticing them. You catch yourself thinking fear-based thoughts, victim thoughts, separation thoughts. And when you catch them, you don't judge yourself for having them. You simply choose differently. I notice I'm thinking scarcity. I choose to think abundance. I notice I'm thinking powerlessness. I choose to think creative power. That sounds exhausting, I said. At first, yes. Old neural pathways are strong. But Sarah, your brain has neuroplasticity. Every time you notice a negative thought and choose differently, you weaken the old pathway and strengthen a new one. After weeks of practice, it becomes automatic. Your default setting shifts from fear to love. The third pillar glowed. Fourth pillar, shadow acknowledgement. When something triggers you, makes you angry, afraid, defensive, shut down, you pause. You don't react. You ask, what shadow is this showing me? What rejected part of myself is this reflecting? You use triggers as teachers instead of threats. You journal about them. You sit with the discomfort. You integrate, like we did tonight. And if I can't do it alone? I asked. Then you seek support. Therapist, healer, trusted friend, community. Shadow work is often easier with witnessing. The key is committing to the practice, to being willing to look at what you've been avoiding. The fourth pillar brightened. Fifth pillar, evening integration. Before sleep, you review the day without judgment. You celebrate wins. I caught 3 negative thoughts and redirected them. You note challenges. Old powerlessness pattern came up around climate news. You forgive yourself for slips. I reacted defensively to my colleague, but I'll do better tomorrow. And you set sleep intention, integration and healing through the night. Why is this important? I asked. Because you're training your consciousness deliberately. You're not waiting for transformation to happen to you. You're choosing it actively. And the evening review ensures you're tracking progress, learning from experience, staying accountable to yourself. The fifth pillar completed the structure. All 5 were glowing now, creating a stable architecture of light. These 5 pillars, the being said, practiced daily, will transform your life within weeks. Not because they're magic, but because they're consistent conscious choice. And Sarah, this is what you'll teach. Not in academic language. In human language. Through your own experience. You'll show people it works because it worked for you. I studied the 5 pillars. Gratitude. Intention. Thought vigilance. Shadow acknowledgement. Integration. It seemed almost too simple. But I just experienced shadow integration, and I knew it worked. Maybe transformation didn't require complexity. Maybe it just required willingness and consistency. What about the external world? I asked. What about the actual reefs dying? The climate actually collapsing? Does inner work actually change outer circumstances? Let me show you, the being said. The hologram shifted. It showed me, not current me, but future me. 3 months from now. I was underwater, diving in a reef system I recognized, one I'd studied years ago. A site I'd documented as nearly dead. And in the hologram, I was seeing something impossible: regeneration. New coral growth. Fish returning. Life where there should only be death. Is that real? I whispered. Or just a possible future? Both, the being said. It's a probability line based on the frequency you'll hold after tonight. Your raised consciousness, maintained consistently, will literally affect the physical environment you study. Not because you're magical, but because consciousness and matter are entangled. As your frequency rises, the quantum field around you reorganizes. And coral, being living consciousness too, responds to that field. They begin regenerating because the field that was suppressing their regeneration, the field of human despair and separation, has shifted in your presence to a field of hope and connection. I stared at the hologram. So it's not that I'm saving them with my consciousness. It's that I'm removing the interference of my low consciousness, allowing their natural regenerative capacity to function. Exactly. The being's excitement was palpable. You're not the healer. You're the frequency holder that creates space for healing to occur naturally. This is true for coral. This is true for humans. This is true for the entire planet. You don't fix Earth with consciousness. You raise the collective frequency enough that Earth's own regenerative intelligence can function again. And if enough people do this? I asked. If we reach critical mass? Then Earth heals itself. Rapidly. In ways that will seem miraculous to those who don't understand consciousness mechanics. Ocean systems stabilizing. Atmospheric chemistry rebalancing. Species recovering. Not because of technology, though technology can support the process, but because the fundamental frequency generating destruction has shifted to a frequency generating restoration. I took a shaky breath. I want to believe this, but part of me still thinks it sounds too good to be true. Too easy. It's not easy, the being corrected. It's simple, but not easy. Simple means clear and straightforward. Easy means requiring no effort. This requires immense effort, Sarah. Daily discipline. Consistent choice. Willingness to face what you've been avoiding your whole life. Courage to stay conscious when unconsciousness would be more comfortable. This is the hardest work humans can do, to transform their own consciousness against all external resistance. But it's possible. And you're going to prove it. The being moved closer to me, those golden eyes holding mine. Sarah Chen, in a few hours, I'm going to return you to that cliff. You're going to walk back to your cabin. You're going to return to your regular life. And everything will look the same. The reefs will still be struggling. The climate data will still be alarming. The world will still be in crisis. But you will be different. Fundamentally different. And that difference will spread. To everyone you meet. To everyone who reads your work. To everyone who feels your frequency. You're going to be a node of high frequency in a field that desperately needs more nodes. You're going to be a living example that transformation is possible. And Sarah, you're going to help humanity reach critical mass. One person at a time. One choice at a time. One moment of consciousness at a time. What if I fail? The question came out small. What if I fall back into old patterns? You will, the being said simply. You'll have bad days. Old shadows will resurface. Despair will visit. But you won't stay there as long. You won't believe it as completely. Because you'll know what you know now. You'll have tonight as a reference point. And you'll have the practices. Use them. Every single day. Non-negotiable. They're not optional if you want to maintain this shift. They are the foundation. Okay, I said. I commit. Daily practice. No matter what. Good. Now, I have one more gift for you before I return you. The being reached into the air, literally into the air, like there was a dimension I couldn't see, and pulled out something. A small crystal, maybe the size of my thumb, glowing with soft golden light. This is a frequency amplifier. It won't do the work for you, but it will help while you're building strength. Hold it during morning practice. Keep it near you during the day. It will help you maintain the frequency you've accessed tonight until your own field stabilizes at this level. I took the crystal. It was warm, pulsing gently against my palm like a tiny heartbeat. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it with everything I had. "Thank you for coming. For showing me. For healing me. For giving me purpose again." "I showed you nothing you didn't already know," the being said gently. "I just helped you remember. And Sarah, remember this too. You're not alone. There are thousands like you awakening simultaneously across the planet. You'll find each other. Support each other. Teach each other. Build networks of high frequency. This is how transformation happens, not through isolated individuals, but through communities of consciousness committed to evolving together." "When will I see you again?" I asked. "Maybe never. Maybe soon. It depends on what you need. But Sarah, you won't need me much longer. You're becoming your own teacher, your own guide. And soon, you'll be guiding others. That's the path. Student becomes teacher. Teacher creates more teachers. Exponential spread of consciousness. This is how critical mass is reached." The being moved toward the opening in the craft. "It's time. Dawn is coming. I need to return you before light." I followed, feeling suddenly reluctant to leave this impossible space that had become a womb of transformation. We exited the craft, walked across the invisible field again. The cliff was right where we'd left it. The ocean still crashing below. But I was completely different than the person who'd stepped off this edge hours ago. We reached solid ground. The being turned to face me one last time. "Sarah Chen, what you learned tonight, share it. Not as dogma. Not as religion. Just as your experience. Tell people what happened. Show them the practices. Be living proof. And trust that those who are ready will hear. Those who aren't ready yet will dismiss you. That's okay. You're not here to convince anyone. You're here to be a beacon for those who are already seeking light." "I will," I promised. "I'll share it. I'll teach it. I'll live it. Then my work here is complete." The being began to glow brighter. "Remember, you are not powerless. You never were. You are a creator. Use that power consciously. Choose love. Choose growth. Choose consciousness. Every single day. The galaxy is watching. The universe is supporting you. And Earth is counting on you and millions like you to tip the scales toward transformation." The being stepped backward, toward the cliff edge. Stepped off, onto air. Walked back to the hovering craft. I watched as the craft sealed itself. As it began to glow brighter. And then, in a flash of light, it was gone. Accelerated into the sky so fast I couldn't track it. Just gone. I stood there alone on the cliff, crystal warm in my hand, tears on my face, as the first light of dawn began to paint the eastern sky. And I whispered to the empty air, to the universe, to whatever consciousness might be listening. "I won't forget. I won't waste this. I promise." That was 3 months ago. 3 months since that impossible night that rewrote my entire understanding of reality. And I need to tell you what happened next, because I need you to know this is real. That it works. That you can do this too. The first week was hard. I returned to my apartment in San Diego, back to my regular life, and immediately doubted everything. Had it been real? Had I had some kind of psychotic break? Was I losing my mind? But the crystal was real. Solid in my hand. And more importantly, I felt different. That lightness in my chest hadn't disappeared. The crushing weight of guilt and powerlessness was just gone. Not completely. I could still access those feelings if I looked for them. But they weren't the default anymore. For the first time in 20 years, my baseline state was something other than despair. I started the practices immediately. Every morning, 6 a.m., no exceptions. Gratitude. Intention. I felt ridiculous at first, sitting in my apartment talking to myself about being grateful for coffee and morning light. But I did it anyway. And by day 3, something shifted. The gratitude started feeling real. Not performed. Real. The thought vigilance was harder. I'd catch maybe one negative thought out of 10 at first. But I kept practicing. And slowly, the ratio improved. 1 out of 5. Then 1 out of 3. My mind was learning. Neural pathways were actually changing. On day 12, something external shifted. I got an email from a colleague I hadn't heard from in over a year. She was starting a new reef restoration project, had funding, and wanted to know if I'd be interested in participating. The timing was perfect. The opportunity was exactly what I needed. Synchronicity or manifestation. I chose to see it as evidence that the frequency work was creating external effects. I said yes. Week 3 was the hardest. The being had warned me. Old patterns came roaring back. I read a new climate report, worse projections, as always. And that familiar despair started rising. The voice, see? Nothing's changing. You're deluding yourself. The planet's still dying. You're still powerless. But this time, I caught it. I recognized it as old pattern, not truth. I sat with the despair instead of suppressing it. Journaled about the shadow it was revealing. My deep terror that no amount of work would matter, that I was cosmically insignificant. And I integrated it. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to shift. By the end of that day, I wasn't crushed. I was still present. Still functioning. Still choosing consciousness. That was the moment I knew this was real. The old me would have spent weeks spiraling from that report. The new me processed it in hours. Month 2, life looked qualitatively different. I was sleeping better. My chronic back pain, 20 years of stress held in my body, was diminishing. Old friends were commenting, something's different about you. You seem lighter. I hadn't told anyone about the encounter. How could I? But they could feel the frequency shift, even if they didn't have words for it. The Reef Restoration Project launched. Small scale, pilot program. But I approached it totally differently than my old research. I wasn't trying to save the reefs through force of will. I was holding high frequency, hope, love, connection, while doing the work. And somehow, that made everything easier. Calmer. More effective. Month 3, I went diving in the site we'd been working on. A site I'd documented 5 years ago as nearly dead. Less than 10% live coral coverage. Bleached, broken, decimated. I descended into the water, expecting modest improvements at best. What I saw made me pull my regulator out of my mouth in shock. Regeneration. Significant, visible regeneration. New coral polyps establishing. Fish species returning that hadn't been seen in this area in years. Color where there should only be white death. My dive partner, a young marine biologist named Marcus, was gesturing frantically, equally shocked. When we surfaced, he was yelling, "Did you see that? Dr. Chen, did you see that? That shouldn't be possible." The water temperature, the pH, nothing's changed enough to explain that level of recovery. It's like the reef decided to heal itself. I said nothing, but I knew. I could feel it. My raised frequency, maintained consistently for 3 months, had created a field that allowed the coral's natural regenerative intelligence to function. Not because I had healed them with magic powers, but because I'd stopped interfering with my low-frequency field of despair. The reef had healed itself. In my presence. And if that could happen with coral, it could happen with anything. Anyone. That night, sitting on my balcony overlooking the ocean, I made a decision. I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. I had to teach it. Had to share it. Even if people thought I was crazy. I started small. Offered a workshop, Consciousness and Environmental Action. 12 people came. I taught the 5 pillars. Did guided shadow work. Explained frequency mechanics without mentioning aliens. Most of the attendees were polite but skeptical. But one person, a young woman named Nina, got it. I could see it in her eyes. The recognition. The hunger. After the workshop, she came up to me crying. "Everything you said. I felt this but couldn't articulate it. I've been suicidal over climate grief. But what you're teaching, it's giving me hope for the first time in years." I spent an hour with her. Shared the practices in detail. Told her about my own journey without mentioning the alien encounter. Focused on the transformation, the practices, the results. 2 weeks later, she emailed me, Dr. Chen, I don't know how to explain this, but I did the practices every morning like you said. And something shifted. I'm not less concerned about climate, but I'm not paralyzed anymore. And yesterday, this is weird, I was at a coffee shop feeling peaceful, and someone sat next to me and we started talking, and she's starting a non-profit doing exactly what I wanted to do and asked if I wanted to join. Did I manifest that? I replied, yes. Or more accurately, you shifted frequency and a matching frequency opportunity appeared. It's not magic, it's mechanics. Keep going. And Nina, pay it forward. When someone comes to you needing what you've learned, teach them. That's how we reach critical mass. And she did. Within a month, Nina had taught 3 friends. Each of them started practicing. Each of them started experiencing shifts. The ripple was spreading. This is how transformation happens. Not through top-down mandates or technological fixes, but through bottom-up awakening. One person at a time. One choice at a time. One moment of consciousness at a time. I'm sitting on that same cliff tonight as I record this. 3 months to the day since the encounter. The sun is setting again. The ocean is still crashing against the rocks below. Everything looks the same. But everything is different. Because I'm different. And the 12 people from my workshop are different. And Nina's 3 friends are different. And everyone they'll teach will be different. The field is shifting. Point by point. Light by light. Frequency by frequency. We're at 37% awakened, the being said. That means we need just 14% more to reach critical mass. 14% of 8 billion humans. About 1 billion people. 1 billion people doing the inner work. Integrating shadows. Raising frequency. Choosing consciousness. It sounds impossible. But 3 months ago, I thought I was beyond hope. 3 months ago, I was considering whether to keep living. And now I'm teaching consciousness transformation to strangers and watching reefs regenerate and feeling purpose that goes beyond anything I experienced in 20 years of traditional activism. If that's possible, then anything is possible. So let me talk directly to you now. To whoever's watching this. Because if you've made it this far, if this story resonated with you, I need to tell you something important. This story, my story, is also your story. Not because you've met an alien, but because you carry the same wounds, the same questions, the same desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, your individual choices matter on a scale you can't imagine. Maybe you're depressed. Maybe you feel powerless watching world chaos. Maybe you've lost someone and can't find meaning. Maybe you wake up wondering what's the point. Maybe you're so tired of fighting, of trying, of caring when it seems nothing changes. I see you. Your pain is real. Your despair is a valid response to apparent reality. You're not crazy for feeling overwhelmed. You're awake to how broken things look. But what if everything you think about your situation is based on incomplete information? What if Earth isn't dying but transforming? What if your powerlessness is an illusion covering actual power you've never accessed? What if your individual choices matter on a galactic scale you cannot comprehend? I can't prove an alien visited me. Maybe it was an elaborate delusion. Maybe I had a break with reality on that cliff. But here's what I know. Living ASIF what I learned is true creates better reality than living as if it's not. So I'm inviting you, no, I'm begging you, try this. Tomorrow morning, before your phone, before news, before anything, take 15 minutes. Choose 3 things you're genuinely grateful for. Visualize Earth healing. Feel as if it's already happening. Set intention. Today I choose love over fear. Then notice your thoughts throughout the day. When despair comes, redirect. When powerlessness whispers, choose differently. I won't lie and say it's easy. The first weeks are hard. Old patterns fight back. But if you persist, if you make this non-negotiable, your life will change. Not because I say so. Because physics says so. Consciousness affects matter. That's not belief. That's quantum mechanics. And we don't have infinite time. Earth is at a critical juncture. Not doomed, but decisive. The next few years determine planetary trajectory for the next 1,000. And that trajectory is being determined by billions of individual choices. Your choice to practice consciousness. Your choice to integrate shadows. Your choice to raise frequency. It literally matters. You are not alone. You were never alone. Even if you never meet an alien, never have a mystical experience, never feel special, you are cosmically significant. Your healing heals the universe. Your awakening awakens all. Your choice to love when hate seems justified shifts fields beyond your comprehension. So please, try. For 30 days. Give this your genuine effort. And watch what happens. Not just externally, internally. And then, when you feel the shift, when you see synchronicities appear, when life starts reflecting consciousness, pass it on. Teach one person. Who teaches one person? That's how we reach critical mass. Some of you watching are feeling something right now. A pull. A knowing. You want to go deeper. You want structured guidance. You want support beyond this video. That's why I created a resource. The ebook, Reconnecting with Your Divine Essence. It's in the first pinned comment below. It's a comprehensive guide for this inner work. Shadow integration processes. Frequency practices. Daily templates. Troubleshooting obstacles. Integration exercises. Connection practices. The book won't do the work for you. No book can. But it'll give you a roadmap. And sometimes having a clear map makes the difference between quitting and persisting. Check it out if you feel called. If not, that's okay too. The practices I've shared in this story are already enough to transform your life if you commit to them. Whether you get the book or not, please, please, do the work. That's what matters. Not consuming more information, but applying what you already know. 3 months ago, I was standing on a cliff deciding whether to keep living. Tonight, I'm sitting in that same spot, watching the same ocean, but I'm a completely different person. Not because life got easier, it didn't. Climate crisis is still real. Reefs are still struggling. World still has massive problems. But I'm not powerless anymore. I'm not a victim anymore. I'm a conscious participant in Earth's transformation. And that shift, from powerless to powerful, from victim to creator, changes everything. If an alien taught me anything, it's this. We are not waiting to be saved. We are the salvation. Every one of us who does the inner work, who faces shadows, who chooses love over fear, we are changing the world. Not someday. Right now. Today. This moment. Leave a comment below. Tell me, what resonated? What challenged you? What will you commit to trying? Let's build a community of humans committed to conscious evolution. Because we need each other. This work isn't solitary, it's collective. If this video helped you, subscribe and hit the bell. I'm sharing more stories, more teachings, more support for this journey. Consider becoming a member or leaving a thanks badge. Your support allows me to keep creating this content. Every bit helps. Remember, you're not here by accident. Something brought you to this video at this moment in your life. Maybe you needed a reminder of your power. Maybe you needed hope. Maybe you needed permission to believe individual choices matter cosmically. Whatever you needed, I hope you found it. And I hope, God, I really hope, you take what you learned here and you live it. Because Earth is waiting. The galaxy is watching. And your awakening matters more than you know. We're approaching critical mass. 37% to 51%. 1 billion more awakened humans. You could be one of them. You could be the node that connects 10 others. Who connect 100 others. Who connect millions. This is how we transform the world. This is how we fulfill Earth's purpose as the galaxy's last hope. This is how we prove that conscious evolution through dense matter is possible. One person at a time. One choice at a time. One moment of courage at a time. I was that person 3 months ago. Broken. Hopeless. At the edge. And I chose to listen. I chose to heal. I chose to transform. Now I'm asking you, will you choose it too? The galaxy is waiting for your answer.